Throughout this course, you may hear the term drug modality being used. And drug modality is when drugs are grouped together based on their size and chemical structure. So what types of drug modalities exist? The first drug modality that we will discuss are the small molecule drugs. So looking at the drugs on the market, small molecule drugs make up 80% of drugs on the market. Most drugs prescribed and almost all over-the-counter drugs are small molecule drugs. And their most important and defining characteristic is their size. So as their name suggests, the small molecule drugs are small in size in that they have a low molecular weight and are defined as having a molecular weight of less than or equal to 900 Daltons. Let's now look at the source of small molecule drugs. Small molecule drugs can come from natural or synthetic sources, or both. Most often, small molecule drugs are synthetic in that they are chemically synthesized. But some small molecule drugs can come from natural sources. For example, small molecule drugs can come from plants or microbes. But some small molecule drugs can come from both, in that they come from a natural source and are then chemically altered. These drugs are referred to as semi-synthetic drugs. For example, from the poppy flower, comes morphine, and from morphine, heroin can be produced. So heroin is a semi-synthetic opioid compound, and it is characterized as a small molecule drug because it has a molecular mass of 369 Daltons. So this is an example of a small molecule drug. Of course, we also have drugs that are much larger than the small molecule drugs, such as vaccines, proteins, antibodies, probiotics, and gene and cell-based therapies. So what are these drugs? Well, it turns out that these larger drugs are derived from natural sources, and this broad class of large drugs are called biologics. So the biologics are a growing group of drug modalities, and they make up less than 20% of the drugs on the market. And the biologics are much larger in size compared to the small molecule drugs. And this is due to their complex structures. As well as their complexity and size, it is important to know that all biologics come from natural sources, hence their name. And a natural source can be, for example, a living organism, such as humans or animals. Or they exist in a natural source and can be manufactured, synthesized, or modified outside of that original source and still be considered a biologic. An example of a biologic is human insulin, which has a molecular mass of 5,800 Daltons. So So small molecule drugs and biologics differ not only in terms of their size and structure, but also in terms of how they behave or their mode of action in the body and their suitability for certain drug forms. So let's compare and contrast these in general. Let's look at the price of these drugs. For small molecule drugs, they are generally cheaper to produce and therefore are cheaper to buy. In contrast, most biologics are much more expensive to produce and therefore are more expensive to buy compared to small molecule drugs. Let's look at how these drugs are delivered into the body. For small molecule drugs, they can be processed into easily ingestible tablets or capsules, and so are most commonly taken via the oral route of administration. Whereas for biologics, they are typically administered by injection or infusion. And when we compare the different advantages of these drug modalities, for the small molecule drugs, their main advantage is their ease of use, so their convenience. Whereas for the biologics, their main advantage is their novel therapeutic opportunities. For example, the cell-based and gene-based therapies aim to treat rare diseases that cannot be treated with small molecule drugs, as they use unique mechanisms to do so. So when thinking of the therapeutic effect to be achieved, then the drug modality is important, as it tells us about the chemical structure of the drug and the source of the drug, and is also a big determinant in how drugs are administered.